This episode of the Cult Popture podcast was brought to you by our Patreon. If you want to tell us which films we should watch or get 2 extra exclusive podcasts a month, then please consider joining the cult and donating at www.patreon.com/cultpopture.
Dun, 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 dun.
Is that the Lord of the Rings theme music?
It was supposed to be, but it's not. How does the Lord of the Rings theme music go?
There's a few of them.
Yeah, well, there's the one like.
Yeah.
That's it. And
dun dun dun. Dun dun dun. And sometimes when I'm singing the Terminator theme music, it accidentally turns into that one because the Terminator theme music is. It's like real similar.
they're all similar. All music sounds the same.
That's true. It's all the same thing.
Yeah. It's just
and
the
anyone
same.
who tells you it's not doesn't know music.
Yeah. It's the same
Unlike us.
12 notes repeated in 8 octaves.
Wow.
And, yeah.
That's cool.
Star is Born.
Oh, nice. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So today we're here to talk about, as you could tell by our musical intro, if you're keenly tuned in to what different songs sound like, you'll know that we're and also the fact that we said it, you'll know that we're covering, or if you've read the the title of the episode, we're covering, and actually also if you listen to last week's episode where we
discussed the future.
Yeah. We're talking about the Lord of the Rings franchise.
Of course, because this is film franchise Fortnights on the Cult Popture podcast. And it's been a while, Richard.
It has, actually, yeah, you're right. It has been a while. I haven't even thought about that.
Because I know that we released High School Musical a fortnight ago, but we actually recorded that in December. And so we've had quite a long time of not doing FFF. And now we're just, slipping back into it with a nice, easy to unpack franchise like The Lord of the Rings. This was a Patreon voted franchise because if you donate $1 to our Patreon a month, then you can actually suggest and vote on which franchise we cover. And Lord of the Rings was in that little pocket we'd set aside for ones we're probably not gonna plan on doing. Because we're never gonna accidentally roll on Star Wars because it's not on the roulette, basically. What I'm saying is there are so many podcasts that talk about these tentpole franchises, and despite the fact that we are the definitive talk about franchise podcast, we thought it was more interesting for the listeners to hear us talk about Air Bud than Lord of the Rings, for example.
And I tell you what, the views reflect that.
Yeah, exactly. And so I don't know what we might get some people listening to this because they're excited to
hear us talk about Isengard and Boromir.
Yeah, and we also might get some because we are from New Zealand, so this was literally filmed in our backyard, the country's collective backyard. Or we might just get some people who really like Lord of the Rings and want to listen to every Lord of the Rings podcast they can.
And wherever you're coming from, welcome.
I'm AJ.
And I'm Richard.
And here we go.
And here it is. So, Lord of the Rings, it's a trilogy, obviously. And we should say up top as well, we got a few people asking this during the week. We did watch the extended versions. We both borrowed the DVDs from friends of ours.
I borrowed it from my parents.
Oh.
They're not my friends.
Well, I borrowed it from friend of the podcast, Kieran Bennett. Shout out to you, Kieran. And so, we watched the full, however long they are. We'll get to that later on. But the trilogy
we consumed
of films.
as much of the Lord of the Rings trilogy as you currently can.
Well...
In terms of the single movies.
In terms of the movies, yeah.
Yeah.
So it is a trilogy of 3 films. The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, and The Lord of the Rings, The Return of the King. Came out in 2001, 2, and 3. And they're all directed by Peter Jackson.
My uncle. Your uncle too, actually,
Yeah.
I believe. Everyone in New Zealand is related.
So, AJ, what are these films about? We, of course, know that they're adapted from a series of books by J.R.R. Tolkien.
Mm-hmm. Tolkien. Token. Token black guy. J.R.R. Token black guy. That's who wrote them. So what was interesting about, because should I talk about this now?
No.
Okay, I'll talk about what the overall trilogy is about.
Okay.
Right? So basically, it's set in this fantasy world. It feels so arbitrary to be explaining the plot of Lord of the Rings, the franchise.
Yeah.
Like, the franchise. So it's set in Middle-earth, which is like this fantasy world. And years and years ago, like centuries, millennia ago, this dude named Sauron, who was an evil man, he created a bunch of rings and gave them to the ruling factions of Middle-earth. And those main ruling factions were dwarves, elves, and men, right? And the point, as I understood it, of each of these people getting these rings was to help them govern their faction. Whatever that means, whether that's mind control. I don't know really what it meant. But then, secretly, Sauron created one more ring, and this was the one ring to rule them all.
Oh, that's why they keep saying that.
That's why they keep saying it. And them all referring to the other rings, which means he can now control all the factions. And so a war breaks out. A dude named Isildur cuts off Sauron's finger and then goes to throw the ring in the fiery pits of Mount Doom, which is the only way it can be destroyed, but the ring consumes him and he becomes his own little warmonger and tries to take over the world as well, until the ring gets lost again, and it gets found by a few different characters along the way, before basically it ends up in the hands of Frodo, who's a hobbit, and him and a bunch of other people go on a trip. on a classic Kiwi road trip to dispose of the ring in the fiery pits of Mount Doom. That's the premise of the trilogy as a whole.
Yeah.
Yep. I'm really proud of myself for remembering characters' names this time, because, so full disclosure, I've seen Lord of the Rings maybe twice all the way through. I have two distinct memories in my entire life of sitting down and watching them all through, and watching them for this podcast was one of those two times. Right? So I am in no way as familiar with Lord of the Rings as I am with something like Star Wars or any of the other big tentpole franchises. And so when I sat down this time, I was like, I'm going to actually try understand this, because I think that's why I haven't been attracted to it in the past, is because there's so many names and there's so much mythology. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to focus on everything they're saying, I'm going to remember characters' names. And it is interesting to watch these for the first time as like an adult and be like, oh, so that's why the ring is powerful, and oh, that's why the return of the king needs to happen, and that's why this, I understood the reasoning and the catalysts for each of the story beats for the first time ever in my life. Other than knowing, they have to destroy a really powerful ring, which is all I knew about it beforehand.
Interesting. Well, because you were mentioned to me before the podcast that you had like an amazing way to cover the film's plots. So don't worry, you've got that covered. Was that it?
No.
Okay.
Because we, of course, for full posterity's sake, we like to tell you the plots of each movie that we watched. Is that the right word? Posterity?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, sure. And I thought a good way, because these movies, they're actually all filmed at the same time, so they're not very sequely in terms of like how maybe like an Indiana Jones sequel is.
Yes, we shouldn't even be covering them.
No. They're not even a franchise. It's one movie. But it is kind of like, it does feel less like distinguished chapters and more like one film that was too long to put in one film.
Yeah.
But a really good way to know what each of the films is about is to simply dissect the title of the film and talk about what that means, because that's actually a real good through line to explain the films, right? So, if I may...
You may take it away, my friend.
So the first one's the Fellowship of the Ring, and the Fellowship of the Ring refers to, I think, the nine dudes who they take on the burden of destroying the One Ring to rule them all.
Can you name all of them?
Yes, I can name. So Frodo is a hobbit. He's the ring bearer. He's joined by Samwise Gamgee, who's another hobbit, and they're also joined by two other hobbits named Merry and Pippin.
Yep.
All right. There's also a big wizard called Gandalf, and people call him like Methydras. I don't know what they keep calling him a name starting with M, and I think it might be his surname or something, but I don't know. Anyone listening who's like, I love Lord of the Rings, and Methandrel is not Gandalf's surname, you idiot. I'm sorry. So they're also joined by two men, Aragorn and Boromir. They're joined by a dwarf named Gimli and an elf named Legolas.
Yep.
Is that all of them?
That is. That's the 9.
That's the 9. That's the Fellowship of the Ring. So by the end of the first film, they all get split up. Boromir gets killed. Gandalf gets killed. Sam and Frodo go to deliver the ring to Mordor alone. Merry and Pippin get kidnapped by orcs, who are like the big villains. And Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli go to save Merry and Pippin. That's where the first film leaves us. I'm doing well. I'm doing better than I've ever done at summarising Lord of the Rings.
How often does this happen to you?
Every day. I live in New Zealand, dude. So the second film, The Two Towers, is one that even until I saw it again this time, if you'd said, why is it called The Two Towers? I'd be like, I don't know. I didn't remember why. So it's called The Two Towers because one of the wizards who used to be good but is now evil and working with Sauron is named Saruman, and the way I remember the difference is because Saruman is a man and Sauron is an eye. So he's like the man version of Sauron. Saruman.
Yep.
And Saruman rules over Isengard and Sauron rules over Mordor, and both have large towers. And so the reason it's called the Two Towers is because Middle-earth is going to war against the union of the Two Towers, because those are two very powerful forces who have joined together to try and take over the world. So that's why it's called that.
Yep.
In this one, we also meet Gollum, who was one of the original dudes who found the ring, and now he's like a monster because the ring destroyed him, and he's leading Sam and Frodo to Mordor. Gandalf comes back, but now he's Gandalf the White. And yeah, where does this one end? It ends with them on their way to Mount Doom still.
Yeah.
It's very much the interim. Cool. So that's why it's called The Two Towers. Return of the King is an interesting one. So something I haven't mentioned up until now, and when anyone is recounting the plot of Lord of the Rings, I feel like no one mentions this 1/3 of the story is about this. But basically, Aragorn is the heir of Isildur, who is the guy who originally defeated Sauron. So he's got like spiritual hereditary clout, basically, to save the world. And he's the heir to Gondor, so he's supposed to rule over the kingdom of Gondor. But currently the kingdom of Gondor is ruled by a crazy man, and so Aragorn returns to be the king, and he does it with a sword that defeated Sauron. And
that's why it's called the Return of the King with a sword.
Yeah, exactly. And so the sword is kind of like the gotcha thing. That's the reason why, because he can wield it. And so they go to war. They go to war like 5 times in these movies. And then Frodo and Sam manage to destroy the ring. Sauron falls, and then basically everyone lives. All the main characters survive, except for a bunch of them who decide to get the last boat to heaven at the end, which includes Gandalf, Frodo, and Bilbo, and is Elrond, the elf, and Kate Blanchett's character.
Galadriel.
All right.
What did you just say?
I said Kate Blanchett's character.
Yeah, but then when you repeated the name, what did you say?
Galadriel.
Oh, yeah. I think you said Valadria.
Valantria.
Yeah.
Delicious. Cilantro.
Cilantro.
So I'm sweating from how well I've just recounted.
Oh, it's beautiful,
those
man.
films. I know. I'm very proud of myself.
So you spoke briefly about your experience with the film. So what do you think of the films, and what do you think the general public thinks of them in the way of Rotten Tomatoes?
God, they must each have like between 96 and 99 on Rotten Tomatoes.
They're actually all below 96.
Really?
Yeah.
95.
Yeah. They're 90, 91, 95, and 93.
Interesting.
Guess which one's which?
Is it just in descending order?
Yeah, it's actually, and that was in release order. I should have muddled them up. So Fellowship,
I did it!
Fellowship's 91, Two Towers is 95, and Return of the King is 93. However, two of them have 95 audience score, and one of them has 86% audience score. Can you guess which one is the 86?
Is it Fellowship?
No.
Is it Return of the King?
Yes.
Yeah, interesting.
Very nice. Yeah, so which one's your favourite?
This is a very difficult question, and I knew this was coming.
More generally as well, what do you think of the films?
Okay. All right. I would say I would completely understand why any one of them would be someone's favourite. All right?
Right. Yeah.
Like, there's no, but I think Return of the King, just because it's such a satisfying ending, is the one I'm always stuck with. So I think that's my favourite. And yeah, so I would say they get better as they go along, I think. I really enjoyed all of them, watching them this time. However, that wasn't always the case, Richard, because when I was a young lad, because I was about 7 or 8 when the first one came out, and I was one of those guys who was like, Lord of the Rings dumb, because everyone loved it. And I was like, I'm going to decide not to like Lord of the Rings. And I stuck to that for years and years until I started having to take film seriously, because it was what I was interested in. And so I watched the extended editions for the first time, like sat down and watched them properly when I remember I just finished high school. So 18, I watched them all. And it was like, yeah, they're great. Of course they're great. And now watching them at 25, I'm like, yeah, there's a real good case that these are the best movies, some of the best movies ever made. You know, like, I get it. I get the allure now, because as I said before, like, understanding mythology for the first time really enhanced it, and just like really getting into the humor of it and the action of it and the powerful storytelling in it. So yeah, man. And like, yeah, it's filmed in New Zealand, so you got it.
Yeah, there's a certain obligation.
But it's not like it's a bad obligation. It's kind of an honor. It's like, cool. Like, New Zealand has a chapter in the introductory paragraph of film, a history. New Zealand would probably be mentioned because of these films.
Well, you kind of stole a lot of what I wanted to say, which is annoying.
I'm sorry. I bet you were going to be like, so AJ, he didn't like them growing up. And now, what were you going to say?
No, well, yeah. So basically, my experience with the film is I didn't see the first two on release, but me, my mum, and my sister got out or bought the first two extended editions, and we watched those, and then we went to see the third one in the cinema. One weird memory I do have of it is that I remember eating microwave popcorn for, I think, the first time while watching these films, and I remember getting the Butter Lovers one and thinking, this is too much butter. And it being like, yeah, this is a bit overkill. And then, so I think this must have been the first time I'd seen the extended edition of the Return of the King, because I have never rewatched them, and I didn't actively try and dislike them like you or anything like that. But I think I would say that, like, these are the best films I don't like.
That must be so hard, man, because it's all there for you. It's all like, it's like you're a New Zealand filmmaker and film buff, Richard.
Yeah,
and it's like, these should be something you hold dear to your heart. And I kind of in similar boat to you.
You interrupted me instead of letting me explain myself, but continue.
No, you interrupt me back. That's how a good relationship is built, dude. It's gaining ammo to, like, then throw back at the other person when they screw up. I don't dislike them, but, like, to me, and I think I've said this before on the podcast, but just fantasy just does not interest me, and like any kind of, like, medieval history as well, just like, it doesn't really
excite me. And it's like, some people have Lord of the Rings that they're like obsessed about, and some people have Star Wars. I mean, like personally, like in terms of the big tentpole franchises, mine would be the MCU is the one that I'm, the most invested in actively. And I'm not saying it's the best one, but Lord of the Rings, it's like watching them, I'm like, yep, these are fine, these are enjoyable, but they're just not really for me, to be honest. And it is a show. Like, it's same as watching Game of Thrones. Because I don't watch Game of Thrones, but I don't feel like I'm missing out on anything. Like everyone's, it's actually like the best show ever. It transcends fantasy, and I don't think that some parts of these films do, and we'll probably get to that in a bit. But like, just that setting. It just automatically makes me turn off. And I think it's because, how you've said in the past that you're too dumb for heist movies?
Yeah.
Yeah, see, I think I'm smart enough for heist movies, but I'm too dumb for fantasy. Because I love a good heist movie. But fantasy, it's just like there's so much mythology and world building to take in, and it's like I know you can really sit down and it just comes second nature to some people. Like they love hearing about Isengard and all these different things, and it's just whoosh, just goes straight over my head. And I mean it's also probably it is for lack of trying, because I'm not sitting there forcing myself, and I did for a little bit in these films, but there's just so much to take in. Having said that, though, I do agree, and that like there is an argument to be made that these are the 3 greatest films ever made, and I don't disagree with that.
Yeah,
at all. Like,
wow, that's awesome.
Like, if someone, especially like the production of these films, if someone was like, "What's the greatest film production of all time?" I'd be like, the Lord of the Rings trilogy. Like, undeniably, like the likes of this had never been seen before, and I don't think will ever be seen again.
Dude, specifically the pre-production is what impresses me the most. Yeah. Like, so there's an old adage, you make a film 3 times, right? So you pre-production, production, and post-production. So you plan it, you film it, you edit it. The filming of it's great, and it's like, yeah, man, they must have been filming every day for like 7 years to finish this. And
it was like 18 months,
Was the whole thing, the whole trilogy?
Yeah, 18 months.
Only 18 months for the whole trilogy.
Yeah, well, you think about like how long it usually takes to shoot a film, like 1 to 2 months.
Yeah, I guess so. There's a lot of locations. There's a lot of location scouting. Yeah. But that's what I'm going back to, is that's why it would have only taken 18 months. Because the pre-production
like 3 years of pre-production.
So fucking long.
Yeah.
So that's when you work, you find the private farm that you can build Rohan on, and that's when you like make the armor for the orc, and like that's out of focus in the background. That's
like it was like just one dude made all the chainmail.
Oh my god.
And it's amazing. Like fucking hell. And I mean, from a production standpoint, I cannot deny how amazing these films are, and how, and again, like I'm not ashamed of Lord of the Rings being synonymous with New Zealand, even though I'm not into it. And I've been really since we started this podcast for almost 3 years, I've been nervous to do Lord of the Rings because I know deep down I don't like them.
Yeah. And now you're doing it, and it's fine.
Yeah. And so, because I was really worried on how to express that opinion, because I don't think I'm really going to say anything negative about them for the next however long this podcast is. But just know deep down that I don't like these films. Like, I do not hate them, and I do not dislike them, but they're just like I don't think about them.
Because we've been doing this for so long, we do have like this looming question over us that's like, what's either the best franchise we've covered, or what's the best franchise of all time? And honestly, the only thing wrong with the Lord of the Rings franchise is that some of the CGI hasn't aged as well.
Yeah.
And the Hobbit trilogy like ruined its critical legacy.
Yeah.
Which is actually a pretty, like, because we eat the whole sandwich when we do franchises. So like, if a film is 3 really good films and 3 really bad films, that does land it at a 50%. So we'll talk about that more when we cover the Hobbit. But it is kind of interesting. But yeah, I would say I think there's something in there for everyone, because I think the first one is just a real solid fantasy blockbuster that you can watch and feel complete when watching it. The second one, I think, is like really hard with like really like full on with its story production and like the way it progresses, and you get a lot of cool new characters introduced in the second one. And I think the second one critically was the best one, right? There was the most.
Yes,
Yeah. And I can understand that, because even though, as I said before, I find the story of Return of the King so satisfying. Like the ending, watching it last night at like 2 a.m., I was getting like chills when he's like, "Don't you dare let go," and all the like other wonderful like moments of zeitgeist.
We'll get to this.
Yeah. But the Return of the King does have the most, especially the extended edition, I think, does have the most amount of like, that's kind of weird like moments.
Yeah, there's a few. It is interesting watching, because I watched parts of these with Jess, who was very familiar with the theatrical cuts, and so watching it, and because I'd only, apart from Return of the King, which I don't even remember that well, I'd only seen the extended version. So she's like, "I've never seen this bit before," and because there was one scene that went on for ages, and we were like, and she was like, "Oh, I've never seen this," and I was like, "Yeah, they could probably cut this."
Right,
yeah.
You messaged me saying there was a moment where Jess was like, "I've never seen that before. That's pretty dumb." Can I guess what that was?
Yeah.
Was it when Faramir's talking to his dad, and then he like his dad, I can't remember his name, the steward of Gondor, one of the bad guys. Denethor, there you go. He like looks over and hallucinates and sees Sean Bean's Boromir like turn around and like wave at him, and then he like vanishes. And I was like, that was so stupid. Was that what you were talking about?
I don't think so. From memory, I think when I messaged you was Saruman's death scene.
Right. No, that's like considered one of the scenes that that's a significant scene that's in the extended cut that like people have strong feelings about, basically.
Yeah. Because I think that just the talking beforehand went on for ages, and she was like, "What is this?"
Dude, so that's another thing. They all have this, but Return of the King, its biggest blemish, is that, like, people talk from, like, miles away, and they're like, "Hello, Saruman," and he's like, "Gandalf, you've come back," and it's like, he's on top of, like, a 30-foot high tower talking to the ground, and it's like, that surely, like, be like, "Hello, Gandalf," and he'd be like, "Is that Saruman?" It's so like Theoden is like rolling, running back and forth in front of his army on the horses, being like, "We're gonna go fight," and there's like this dude at the 10,000th man back, and he's like, "I don't know what's going on. I don't know. I don't know if we're gonna be galloping to war yet." Like, because it's so funny, because like I have to imagine like Aragorn when he's like, "There'll be a day when the world of men falls, but it is not this day." There's got to be like someone whose job it is, like 30 people back, to be like, "There's a day when man will fall, but it's not this day," and then someone else. But it's like Chinese whispers, or a less racist version of whatever that game's called, Telephone, that goes all the way back.
Chinese telephone.
Chinese telephone that goes all the way back to like the last person, and by that he's like, it's like it's like completely different. He's like, he says that
he says you're gay.
He says that the world of men is cool, and that he's really gay. Or like when the boats come in and they're like, "You may go no further" in Return of the King, and they're like, "What says who?" And it's like, do you know how loud the ocean is when you're on it, or when you're standing right in front of it? It's like, they're not going to hear you. And he's like, "Fire a warning shot." They're like, "What?" And then this arrow just kills Peter Jackson's cameo, and he's like, "Bleh."
It's interesting as well, speaking of Peter Jackson, watching these films now, knowing a bit more about film and a bit more about where Peter Jackson sort of came from, there's so much like schlocky B-movie camera work in these films. That was really interesting, because it's something I've never seen talked about, and I didn't notice at the time, but especially in Fellowship I found.
Yeah, exactly. I agree.
Is that like, there's a lot of, dramatic, like the camera pushing into someone and tilting as they, give a shocked expression. And it's like, it kind of adds a bit of a charm to it.
Yeah. Fellowship's the most charming. Fellowship's the one that feels like anyone could have made this film, kind of,
Yeah.
So I really enjoyed that, yeah.
Well, it's time now, AJ, for some randomly placed random trivia. So I calculated how long every film franchise we've covered is, because this is known for being quite long.
Especially the extended editions. We should also mention, we know that it's generally considered that they're not the best, like the optimum way to... Like, apparently the theatrical cuts are better than the extended editions.
Interesting.
Yeah, a lot of people think that. But I saw it more as like, we're thorough. Like, we're going to do the longest version.
Although I don't know if we will for The Hobbit, will we?
Are there extended editions of The Hobbit?
There are.
Let's do it, dude.
They're harder to get a hold of, I think, though.
Okay.
Because who do you know that has the extended Hobbit trilogy?
Peter Jackson. I know him. He's my neighbour and my uncle.
Yes. So, this is the fun fact. It's the 69th franchise we've covered. Just thought that was a funny number.
How appropriate that Lord of the Rings would be the 69th franchise we've covered.
But in terms of runtime, we've covered 69 franchises.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you reckon this ranks in terms of length?
Yeah, for individual movie, it's definitely the longest. But
like for total runtime in minutes of every film put together.
So this would be nearly 12 hours long, right? So, I mean, we've watched hour and a half long movies for like franchises full of hour and a half long movies that were more than 12 entries. So I don't know. It'd be in the upper echelon, but not that. Not that high.
15th longest.
Yeah, that feels right.
This isn't put together, but it's longer than the 5 Spider-Man films, the 5 Twilight films, the 5 Air Bud films, Scary Movie, and Final Destination films. It's also longer than the 6 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle films, the 6 films we covered for the 2018 Christmas special, and it's also longer than the 7 Air Buddies films.
Well,
we spent more time watching Lord of the Rings than Air Buddies. It didn't feel like it.
No, Air Buddies felt like it went on forever.
But it's just a few minutes shy of Beethoven and the Godzilla Heisei period.
Wow. If you had to watch if you had to watch one franchise all in a row, would it be Beethoven or Lord of the Rings?
Beethoven's more varied.
That for as long as they are, the Lord of the Rings movies, they whiz by for a 4-hour movie.
Some of them do.
I felt like a 4-hour movie. I was like, yeah, I'm engrossed. Like, this isn't feeling like 4 hours at all.
Because the extended editions, if you don't know, on the DVD, it has a point where it's like the story continues on disc 2. And the first half of Return of the King dragged for me, but then the second half of Return of the King is probably my favourite part of the franchise.
Yeah.
Because that's when all the character arcs are wrapped up nicely. And
so many character arcs, and they're all, like, excellent.
Yeah.
Every character arc is, like... And some of these weren't even, like, groundwork laid by Tolkien. Like, I remember hearing that Arwen... not that she has a huge character arc or anything. Arwen's only mention in the original Lord of the Rings is in the appendices. It says Aragorn married someone named Arwen. Arwen, however you say it. Not that she's got the longest character arc or anything, but I thought that was interesting.
Also, another fun piece of random trivia that only relates to this podcast. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I had to think about this. But this is the first franchise which we've both met a star of. Because...
yeah, maybe. I mean, technically... Chris was in was in American Pie,
but this is the first franchise that we've both in person separately met a star of.
How to find meet?
Well, you met Brett McKenzie,
on
the bus, and I've acted with Ian McKellen. So
and you met
and
Martin Freeman as well. Didn't you?
He's not in this one, but for the next one, it'll be the second time we've both separately met a star of.
Right? Yeah, because.
Do I tell you a Brett McKenzie story?
Have I not told my Brett McKenzie story on the podcast before?
You must have, but tell it again.
It is, like, back me up here. It's a real good story.
We'll let the audience decide.
Whatever. Okay, so this was in 2014. I went on a trip. I went on a holiday to Wellington, which is our nation's capital, for those who don't know. and I went there to hang out with my friend, and I was there for 3 days, and we were walking around the city. It was my first day there, walking around the city, and then my friend goes, "Hey, Brett McKenzie's right behind us." And I looked around, and in my mind, I was like, "Who's Brett? Did we go to high school with Brett McKenzie? Who's Brett McKenzie?" And then I saw him, and I was like, "Holy shit!" And like we crossed the road, and then I was like, "God, if I got a photo with him, that would be amazing." And he was like, "Should we go back?" I was like, "Yeah," because all weekend long up to this point, I'd been posting like pictures of things in Wellington and saying, "I am Wellington" was like my statement. And so we waited for him to stop talking to someone. He was outside a cafe, and then we were like, "Oh, hey, can we get a photo with you?" And he was like, yeah. And I was like, "Hey, I'm AJ." And he was like, hi, I'm Brett. And I was like, "I know you're Brett."
I had the exact same thing when I met Martin Freeman. I was like, "Hi, Rich." He's like, "I'm Martin." I was like, "I know you are."
And so I got a photo with him, and I uploaded it and just wrote, "I am Wellington." And like, the comments were so satisfying. People were like, "I have lived in Wellington for 10 years and never seen someone famous. You're here for 14 hours and you'd see someone." And it was so funny, and like everyone was so jealous, and it was insane. So the whole weekend goes by, right? And the night before I'm set to fly back, I was going to fly back in the morning, and I'm looking at my plane tickets, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, this is a month out." Like, I'd accidentally booked to go back. I was there in September, and my flight back was in October, like exactly a month away. And I was like, shit. So I like rang them up, and they're like, "Oh yeah, we can change that for you. You just go there and da-da-da." And it was like, so it changed from being like a 7 a.m. flight to like a 1 p.m. flight. And so the next day we get up and we're walking to the bus stop, and then my friend's like, "No, let's go to a different bus stop. We won't go to this one." So we go to another bus stop, and the bus stops, and we get on the bus, and I sit down, and my mate's like, "AJ, look who it is." And I look behind me, and Brett McKenzie's sitting there grinning at me. It was so awesome. And I was like, like, "Oh my gosh, this is insane." Like just the butterfly effect of it all, right? Like we had I could have gone on a different flight. I could have got on a different bus to get to the airport. And we're like, "Dude, can we get another photo with you?" And he was like, yeah. And he was so much more like into it the second time just because of how absurd it was. And so I got another photo with him, and I uploaded that and wrote like, "Oh, it was great hanging out with Brett all weekend," and people lost their minds, man. It was so funny. Yeah. And Brett McKenzie's in Return of the King, by the way. If you didn't know, he's got such a small role that like maybe people didn't even recollect that.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's this week's pod vid.
Maybe.
Just AJ telling the story about how he got everyone was real jealous of his status.
There were photos. I've got photos of it. Maybe I'll post them on Instagram.
But yeah, should we talk about Brett McKenzie's role in this? Because he's actually got quite a popular role in it. So you know about Figwit, yeah?
Figwit, yeah.
So Figwit is just when they formed the fellowship, there's like a 2-second shot of Brett McKenzie sitting there, and it was affectionately named Figwit by the fans, which stands for "Frodo is great." Who was that? Because it's supposed to be what you're thinking during the scene. Because you're like, so "Man, attractive. Frodo's great." What? Huh?
Yeah. Because Brett McKenzie's hot, right? That's the implication.
Yeah. And so he got this huge following, and so Peter gave him 2 lines in Return of the King.
And then he reprises that role in a garish cameo in The Hobbit.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what you've acted with Ian McKellen.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Okay, so my story is much less interesting, but I can talk about the funny things I posted on Facebook about it. Cool. So after the Christchurch earthquake, there was the Isaac Theatre Royal in Christchurch is like this beautiful, famous theatre, and it was going to get shut down. And Ian McKellen was here filming for The Hobbit, and so he decided to do a tour of New Zealand, like just basically an evening with Ian McKellen, and he. Like to raise money to save the Isaac Theatre Royal, and me and Aaron, who you can hear on last week's episode of the podcast and next week's episode, him and I went along to this, and so basically it was like half just ask him anything, and it was so great, and like because people are asking about like, oh, X-Men, like, oh, were you a big fan of the comics? He's like, never heard of them. Anyway, and then, but then he's like, and then I read them, and then being a gay man, it was like, because it's this, analogy, and they're so wonderful, and all this stuff, and it was great. He talked about extras and all this other shit, and then the second half was like, basically you just say any Shakespearean play, and he'll deliver a monologue from it off by heart.
It's so cocky, but I love it.
And so, yeah, it was so great. And then he did this one scene where he was like, anyone who wants to be able to say they've acted with Suri and McKellen, come on stage now. And so a group of us went down, me and Aaron went down, and he did the spin. He gathered us all around, like chatted to him, and told us what to do. And it was like, he's basically like, when I snap my fingers, you just all drop dead. Okay, and so we're just like standing there, and he did this thing, and then it got a huge laugh. I couldn't see what he was doing, but it got a huge laugh. And then after the show, I got a photo with him and spoke to him a little bit. But
nice.
Yeah, I posted on Facebook, and since we're talking about the funny things we post on Facebook, I posted a picture being like, guys, I met Dumbledore. And there was like, this one dude was like, must not rage, he's not Dumbledore. And then one of my friends was like, Professor X, no way.
That's great. We should post these photos on Instagram and be like, AJ and Richard hanging out with the stars of Lord of the Rings. And it's like me with Brett McKenzie, who has 4 seconds of total screen time, and you with like the hero of Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, and then we could do it again next week, and I'll put my photo of Martin Freeman, and you can put your same one with Brett McKenzie.
Sounds good. I don't know. Maybe I've met other people from Lord of the Rings. I just don't remember.
Yeah, we probably have. Like, I was thinking about it, because there's like Robbie Magasivas and like just
Who's
all these. He? He's just like one of those little small roles, but like there's just all these random New Zealand actors that you just bump into every now and then. Are just in it. But it is like interesting talking about these films living in New Zealand, because you see people travel from all over the world just to go to like Hobbiton and just to see where these things are filmed. I mean, on the Lord of the Rings subreddit while we were watching these, and there's a scene in the first one where they're like, I think we should get off the road. And one of the top posts of all time is someone being like, oh, I travelled to Wellington. Here's like the bit where they say that. And then I messaged you about it, how strange that is. And then like 5 hours later, someone posted like the same photo, or like from a photo from the same place, being like, I travelled to Wellington. But to us, or to I don't know about you, but to me anyway,
yeah, definitely, I agree.
This could be any walk that I went on as a kid, or could go on in 3 minutes, like it's just like, because people are like, wow, it looks like a whole different planet, and to me I'm like, that's literally just like our entire country looks like that. And you do have these moments, like, because I've driven from Christchurch to Auckland, which if you don't know, New Zealand is like almost the length of the country, a couple of times now, and there's moments where you have these like epiphanies where you're like, fuck, this actually is a real beautiful country. And people travel from all over the world just to get a glimpse of this. And I'm bored of it.
Yeah. Yeah, because so cultural identity in New Zealand is real interesting, because for someone like me, and I won't speak for you, though I feel it's probably similar, but someone like me, for a lot of my upbringing, I felt quite outcast, because sport is a big part of our culture, and like drinking beer is a big part of our culture, like all these things that I just wasn't really interested in. Yeah. And
I do like a good beer now and then, but
sure,
I don't really go for the sports.
No. And so I think even though I was into film and into storytelling from a young age, I think New Zealand was like the idea that I was rejected from New Zealand cultural identity was like wrapped up with Lord of the Rings, and maybe that's why I didn't like it, because growing up through high school, I'd tell people, I was like, oh, I hate New Zealand, like nothing happens here, it's real boring. And I've since changed my tune a bit. I quite like a lot of it, what we've got going on here. But I remember I was doing my first ever freelance video job, and someone picked me up to drive me to Akaroa, which is a French settlement just outside of Christchurch that's like this beautiful beach. It's real weird. Real weird place compared to like other places in like the immediate vicinity. And we were driving through the hills, and the person, like my client who I'd met when she picked me up at 7 a.m. was like, oh, look how beautiful that is. And I looked across at like the sun-drenched mountain across from us, and I was like, Yeah. like you just see it so often that it's, you just don't really register. We did so many road trips. I used to live in Nelson, so many road trips from Nelson to Blenheim when I was like 6 years old that it's just like, this is just what the world looks like.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing, is that we grow up just thinking that the whole world is like this. But at the same time, like, people grow up in urban areas their entire life and would kill to have a glimpse of what we take for granted. But at the same time, like, I would love to see Times Square,
Yeah, man, exactly. I've got such a desire to travel to America one day.
And I think there's like, there's a couple of different types of like travelers. And I think, because I went to Thailand with a group of friends and they were all like, oh, we want to like look at all the temples and all the old shit. And, like, because you get people that travel for history and people that travel for contemporary stuff. And I think I'm more interested in like, oh, where was this filmed, I want to go see the Sun Sphere from The Simpsons in Knoxville. But
where they filmed it in Knoxville.
But yeah, like, I don't know, I think, and especially being from New Zealand, because it is like a huge thing of like, in New Zealand, the culture of it, you have like an OE, and if you're a man as well, you have depression, but you don't talk about it. And then you just kill yourself because we have one of the highest suicide rates in the
this is the stuff
world.
Lord of the Rings doesn't show you.
Yeah, exactly. But, and it is a real problem, but anyway, that's part of New Zealand culture to have like your OE, your overseas experience, and a lot of people do it like after university / college, or after high school. They take like a year to just travel the world, and it's like such a part because we're so secluded from the rest of the world that. But then people do the same to come here, and it's like,
I've never had an OE.
Yeah, neither. Well, I mean, I've gone overseas, but I haven't. I still want to do that, like live overseas for like a year or two.
I've never had enough money to do.
Yeah, now I'm
like
so bad at saving money.
Yeah, same. Yeah, and another
so
thing
subscribe
to
our Patreon.
Yeah. Another thing to consider here as well, if you didn't know, you actually can't go to a lot of the locations they filmed Lord of the Rings in.
Yeah, true.
Like, a lot of them are secluded or private.
Yeah, like inaccessible.
The big one is Hobbiton. That you can,
have you been to Hobbiton?
No, never.
No, neither.
I've driven past it a few times
Same.
on a bus or whatever, but
it's
never.
near Hamilton, yeah?
It's in Matamata.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah. What's the matter with you? Is the joke.
Let's see. How far am I from Hobbiton? I just want to see like how easy it is for me to get to Hobbiton. Like Brent in Texas, if you're listening to this, like directions to Hobbiton from my house. 2 hours. I could get there in 2 hours.
And you haven't.
Yeah, for like, it cost me what, $30 petrol?
Yeah.
And well, yeah, maybe $40-50 petrol round trip. And I actively every day I wake up and choose not to go there.
That's depressing. We should not be doing a podcast on like a cherished franchise like this and be like, I live 2 hours from one of the most iconic film sets of all time. Not going to go.
I would like to go sometime now after watching the films again, just because it's like, you may as well. But yeah, it is so funny that people are willing to spend thousands and thousands of dollars to do this. It's like when Childish Gambino came here recently, and it's like to do this once in a lifetime concert experience, and it's like, oh cool, that's like an hour away. Yeah, I'll just go.
Okay. Who is your favourite Lord of the Rings character? I feel like this is an important part of discussing the series.
Okay. I think probably Aragorn. Mm-hmm. And it's really interesting because Viggo Mortensen is so hot in these movies. But then he's not really in real life. He is a handsome man, but he's not like, ravishing. But in these movies, he's so handsome. And he's just a cool character. He's very badass, very stoic. Everything, a man kind of desires to be.
But they don't tell anyone about their depression. And
yeah, exactly.
Cool. I would say my MVPs would be Sam.
Yeah, Sam's great.
he's such a noble and wonderful
Yeah, despite the
character.
fact that Frodo's just a massive dick like the whole time.
But the thing is, Elijah Wood's like real good in these as Frodo, and I
Yeah.
think that's what saves it. Is like it's not like a bad actor being a little shit. It's an actor who's developed a character that you've grown to love for
Yeah, and you're seeing him
two
get
and a half
corrupted,
minutes. Yeah. And I really like Gimli because he's like my spirit animal. On Instagram, right now, my username is Big Gimli Energy. So go follow me on Instagram. And I'd have to say Smeagol. Smeagol is such a good, or Gollum is such a good villain. So good, like the definition of a sympathetic villain, right?
Yeah.
Like so much about him is so cool and so well, and like you were like, are you gonna? You asked me if I was gonna do a Gollum voice on the podcast, and I was like, that's like doing a Michael Caine impression. Or,
But you were like, hey, can I talk
Schwarzenegger
about
impression.
Gollum's voice? And you were like, and I was like, yeah, sure, if you do it in Gollum's voice. And you were like, I don't want to talk about it now.
What should I? Can you do a Gollum voice? It's not hard.
No, I don't really. I think it's a bit, but it's done.
Passe. Yeah, I feel like
I've never really been able to do a good one, and so I've never really tried.
Right. I think it's like Stitch, but like you've stood on Stitch's nuts, basically.
It's
so it's like kind of
yeah,
thing.
Andy Serkis, based on his cat, coughing up a furball. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, so I do want to talk about Gollum because, or Smeagol, if you will, but so a lot of the effects, because they're practical in this film, hold up. How well do you think the character of Gollum, the CGI character of Gollum, holds up?
With every appearance, it gets better. So the first one, you don't really see him at all. The
Yeah.
second one, I think, Two Towers, I think, is the worst Gollum, like
Right.
looking Gollum. He looks like he's very well superimposed into the shot.
Yeah.
I thought he was all right in Return of the King, and he's real good in An Unexpected Journey.
Yeah.
Sneak peek.
I think the worst Gollum for me is the opening scene of Return of the King. It's like stupidly bad, and I was messaging you about it, and you kept on giving all these defenses, and I was like, it's so bad because.
So what? It's paint the picture here. What scene are we talking
We see it's Return of the King opens with Smeagol, played by Andy Serkis, and not wearing any makeup or anything like that. Back when he was a normal human being,
about? Normal Hobbit.
yeah. So and he is doing the voice, which is definitely a choice.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because if there's a like a halfway that I think he should have done. Like there's a midpoint between this voice and his just normal voice that would have been very easy for Andy Serkis to manifest, because it's just odd seeing a normal looking person with what sounds like a 60-year-old smoker's lung.
But also at the same time sounding like a child.
Yeah, like the perfect marriage of those two things.
So he looks a bit creepy and weird, but then he finds the One Ring and ends up, transforming into the Gollum that we all know and love. But like they decided that the midway point between Andy Serkis and Gollum should be Andy Serkis with a heavy amount of actual prosthetics. And like Gollum is, because Gollum's so gaunt and tiny, like Gollum is Andy Serkis minus some stuff.
Yeah.
And so the midway point between them, they decided the midway point between Andy Serkis and Andy Serkis minus a bunch of stuff should be Andy Serkis plus a bunch of stuff. And it doesn't work because you don't go, like his face shouldn't get puffier and all this stuff before, and then it's just like he suddenly transforms into it. It's like Christopher Nolan said that like one of the only proper CG things in any of his films is Two-Face in The Dark Knight, because he said they tried, but no matter what, you're adding to his face, and you need to be taking away from it. And I think the same thing. They should have done it with CG.
Gollum is like 1,000 years old though, so it's very possible in that time that he grew larger and puffier and then smaller.
I disagree.
Okay.
I just thought, and it just doesn't look right. It looks very, very strange. And
it is odd.
Like
It feels like the wrong decision was made. I love that scene. I love
it's great.
seeing the origin of Gollum.
But yeah,
And
I hate when the close-up of him biting into a fish. That was like one of the scenes I remembered real clearly and thinking, oh, this is disgusting.
The mini plot twist that it was actually Deagle who found the ring and not Smeagol as well. It's like, oh, that's interesting. But yeah, no, I do agree that there was some weird decisions made in portraying not only Gollum as a hobbit, but Gollum transforming into Gollum.
Yeah, well, apparently they weren't originally set on Andy Serkis playing Smeagol. Having him played Gollum and Smeagol, they were like, oh, who should we get to play Hobbit? Smeagol. And then they're like, oh, we don't really want Andy Serkis. And they're like, wait a minute, it needs to be Andy Serkis.
Well, no, and I agree with that because you can see Andy Serkis in Smeagol.
Definitely.
In
Watching
face.
it now, there's a lot. Yeah, I can see a lot of it. Because, I guess now that I'm more familiar with Andy Serkis.
Yeah.
But I think, the character of... Yeah, it's great character, great performance. And apparently there was a big push to get him nominated for supporting actor Oscar, nice. But the Academy regulations require the actor to be physically seen on screen.
Ugh.
Yeah, but I mean we've had a very long discussion about Andy Serkis, and it's like, yeah, the Gollum, his performance as Gollum is fantastic.
Yeah,
but also the hard work of the guys at Weta Workshop is like phenomenal. And it maybe hasn't aged perfectly, but it's not the worst aged effect in the franchise. What do you think? I think the worst aged effect in the franchise is.
Is it the hobbits against real life people, like normal sized people?
That does look weird, and every time you see the hobbits like in a wide shot, you're like, oh yeah, they're real small.
Yeah, it does a good job of making you forget that they're not normal size when they're around other people. Yeah, which is actually a good thing because you would think that'd be such a headache for every single thing you film. Yeah. Of them, but because maybe this is why they did it, because they separate it so that there's two groups of two hobbits, and one of them has Smeagol, who used to be a hobbit and is on his legs anyway, like on his hands and knees anyway, and separate that with the humans, although Gimli's a dwarf and isn't a dwarf in real life.
Yeah, him and Ian McKellen are like the same height.
That's insane, man. I understand the Force perspective stuff, but like how they made Gimli look that high. Yeah. That high. That tall, I should say, when his like constant scene partners are a human and an elf is really cool.
It's really cool. But the worst effect in the franchise for me is the hobbits riding Treebeard. It's so laughably bad.
I didn't think it was laughably bad. I actually wouldn't have thought of that if you hadn't.
Really? Like the scenes of them when they're holding and there's a terrible green screen of them kind of just like hobbling along. Like Treebeard looks great, but it's the green screen to the background that is terrible. Okay. So that's what I think of that. Strike one.
So there's a little anecdote that I always heard about Fellowship of the Ring, or it's not really. I guess it's a piece of trivia, but not necessarily.
We're talking trivia, are we?
In Fellowship of the Ring, I remember famously people would say, "Oh, the point where Sam stops just right when they've gone on their journey, and he goes, if I take one more step, I'll be further away from the Shire that I've ever been." Everyone always said, like, "Oh, did you know that during that scene, you can actually see a silver car driving past in the background?" And it's like this famous goof from Fellowship of the Ring. Every time I have watched that film or been in the room when it's on, because every time I've watched that film 2 times, whenever the film was on, I would always like try find the car, and I never could. And at what point does a goof stop being a goof because you can't see the thing that is apparently wrong with it?
Do you want to know?
Yes.
I didn't actually write this down, but I remember reading it earlier. So basically, Peter Jackson heard this, and he was like, "What? Are you serious?" And so he went back and like spooled through the film, went through like frame by frame, and there's like one flash of light for a frame that could be misconstrued as a car. And they were like, it's completely debunked. And then like years, and they talked about it on the commentaries and stuff like that, but like years later, someone admitted that there was a car in the theatrical release, and it was fixed for the DVD.
So you can't find it anymore?
Yeah, it doesn't exist anymore.
So that's Peter Jackson's re-released, like his George Lucas-y.
Yeah.
bent. Interesting. Okay. Because I remember back when this film came out in New Zealand, it went gangbusters for obvious reasons. And I remember watching What Now? And What Now, for those who aren't in our country, is like our Sunday morning variety show, right? And they were doing a Lord of the Rings trivia little video, and they would show clips from the movie for every piece of trivia they talked about. But when they talked about that one, they reenacted it with like one of the presenters dressed up like a hobbit walking through a field. And they were like, when he says this line, you can see a silver car drive past in the background, and then there is one, and they go, oh, there it is now, and point to it.
Interesting. Well, if we're talking trivia,
are we talking trivia?
Well, yeah, because
that's the question.
I tried to keep the trivia to a minimum, and maybe we'll reveal why later on, because we're not done with Lord of the Rings.
No.
But so some fun bits of trivia that I picked out. So do you know that additional filming was done 2 months after the release of Return of the King? When they go through the like path of the dead, there's a shot of skulls on the ground.
Yeah.
And that was filmed after the film won Best Picture at the Oscars.
Oh, that makes me uncomfortable.
And it was
I don't like that at all.
Added only to the extended edition DVD, which came out like a year later. But Peter Jackson thought it'd be funny to shoot something after winning Best Picture.
I feel very uncomfortable working on a project that's already been
that's
released.
already won the highest award.
But even like if I
Yeah.
I remember once I had to before Cult Pop tried to re-download all my YouTube videos and upload them to a new channel when I was in high school. And one of them, something went wrong and I had to redo something for it. And it was like a 3-year-old video that I had to like fix. And I was like, oh, I feel so weird about working on this.
That's so funny. The stakes are so much lower.
Yeah, this risks like some kind of bad faith with the Academy for tampering with like the piece that won Best Picture.
Yeah, but it is like it's for the extended edition.
Yeah, true.
But also, yeah, we didn't mention it at the top, but this film did very well at the Oscars. Well, this franchise did very well at the Oscars.
All three of them did?
Well, the first two both got nominated for Best Picture and did, I think won a couple of technical awards, but the third one is the biggest clean sweep of the Oscars in Oscar history. It won all 11 categories that it was nominated for, including Best Picture and Best Director. But I think it's one of like 3 films to like win. I can't remember, but like it wasn't nominated for any acting categories, which is interesting.
That is interesting. Yeah.
But
were any of them nominated for acting categories?
Ian McKellen was nominated for Fellowship.
What beat out Fellowship in Two Towers for Best Picture?
Oh, Jesus Christ!
Yeah, come on, bitch. Tell me.
Well, while I look this up, did you know that it's also the longest title for a Best Picture winner?
Wow, that's interesting. Do you think maybe we could talk about titles a little bit more?
We could. I've got a couple things to get to. So, Beautiful Mind beat...
Such a good segue. And you're like, no.
Well, because you asked me to look this up and I wanted...
fair enough.
Beautiful Mind beat Fellowship, and Chicago, famously one of the least deserving, beat Two Towers. But yeah, it seems like Lord of the Rings winning everything was kind of this is for the whole franchise,
Yeah, sure.
And we can talk about titles, but then I have to awkwardly segue back to trivia.
You choose, man. You're driving.
I'm going to keep going.
Ship.
So, yeah, do you know that... Oh, yeah, and also, and it's 10 words long. It's the longest title, beating out Around the World in 80 Days.
Very cool.
From 1956. So it's the longest one in, just shy of 50 years. But the makeup artist who applied Sean Astin's Hobbit feet was named Sean Foot.
That's the best single piece of trivia I've ever heard in my life.
Well, do you want to hear one of the worst?
Yes, please.
This is like, it's just real poorly written.
Is this dumb IMDb trivia?
Dumb IMDb
you
trivia.
You snuck up on me.
So this is the way it's written. And it's like, there's way easier ways to say this, but if one watched the extended editions back to back to back, it would take him or her 681 minutes, 11 hours and 21 minutes to finish.
Wow.
Like, why word it like that?
It's very proper.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
It's like you know what it is? It's like someone's talking to like a girl they like, and they're trying to hint that maybe we should watch all the extended editions back to back, but they don't want to give the game away and be like, I didn't mean us. So it's like, if one were to watch the extended editions back to back to back, him or her,
maybe together,
you don't know, would spend yeah.
So there's quite a few, and there's some famous, like, almost starred kind of moments. Like, famously, Sean Connery turned down Gandalf because he didn't understand the script.
Yep.
And he also turned down Morpheus from The Matrix because he didn't understand the script. So he read a script he didn't understand, which was The League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, and was like, fine, I'm not missing out on another cash cow, and took it. And then it was so bad it made him quit acting forever. But the one that stuck out to me when reading it was that James Corden revealed that his first ever movie audition was for Samwise Gamgee.
How old would James Corden have been then?
Reasonably, he's not that old.
Okay.
He's probably the same age as Sean Astin, actually.
True.
So James Corden is 40. Sean Astin is...
We have to type with one hand on this podcast because the microphone's in the way.
47. So he's actually 7 years younger than Sean Astin.
Wow. That's significant. I mean...
Yeah. I like, as much as I hate James Corden, the idea of James Corden actually kind of works for Samwise Gamgee.
Oh, yeah, but Sean Astin is incredible.
Oh, yeah, Sean Astin's amazing, but, like, the fat, put upon, kind of annoying, but slightly endearing in his younger years.
Yeah.
And British.
Yeah.
Could work well.
No, the problem there is that he wouldn't have been able to convincingly portray a Samwise Gamgee who doesn't want the ring, because James Corden famously steals the spotlight in every interview he's ever done. So it'd be like, the ring is mine, Sam. And he's like, well, maybe give it to me for a bit, huh? How about we do that? Yeah. Why can't I be front and center on the DVD cover? I don't know.
And also, one of the most interesting pieces of trivia that I found is, you know, Legolas only says 3 words to Frodo in the entire franchise.
I have a story about this piece of trivia.
Really?
So,
I'll
continue
finish
yours
it.
first.
So, he only says 3 words to Frodo, which is "and my bow," which arguably isn't even to Frodo; it's like to the entire Fellowship.
Yeah.
But yeah, what's your story, mate?
I remembered that piece of trivia, but I remembered it slightly wrong. And for some reason in my head it was, do you know that Legolas only has 11 lines in the whole trilogy? Because if you hadn't seen them in a while, that might actually make sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he doesn't speak that much.
He doesn't speak that much. And so in the first film, I counted each one of his lines. And when it went past 11, I was like, it must be like 23 lines in the whole trilogy or something. And then I got to Return of the King, and he's like doing this big monologue about the damned, the ghosts from Gondor and stuff, and I was like, all right, this trivia just isn't true at all. And so I looked up what it was, and it was he only speaks to Frodo once. And then at the end, when they're all like, they all gather by Frodo's bed after they've destroyed the ring, and like one by one the characters come in and like hug Frodo. Legolas, like, it's real funny because they all come in and Frodo like says their name, and Aragorn comes in. He's like, Aragorn! And then Legolas comes in and he doesn't say anything. They just look at each other and smile. And then Gimli comes in. He's like, Gimli! It's like, he's actually, like, Elijah Wood made a character decision that he's forgotten Legolas's name. He actually has, man.
That's brilliant. One other thing that I also quite liked on the Wikipedia page, and if I was Peter Jackson, I'd edit this. So it says, as a result of the series' success, Peter Jackson has become a major player in the film business, sometimes called a mogul, in the mold of Steven Spielberg and George Lucas, in the process befriending some industry heavyweights like Bryan Singer and Frank Darabont. I'd probably get rid of Bryan Singer's name if I was Pete.
Well, you know who else he befriended?
Yeah. Well, actually, they kind of had a falling out.
Right.
Because if you have a look at... We're talking, of course, about Harvey Weinstein. But, so Peter Jackson wanted to make King Kong, fell through, then he teamed up with the Weinsteins to try and get the rights to Lord of the Rings. he pitched it as 2 films. The first film would have been Fellowship and the Two Towers and the start of Return of the King, and ended with Saruman's death. And then the second film would have just been, the end of it. But they said it would be too costly, decided to make it as 1 film. They made a video, like, proof of concept kind of thing, shipped it around to New Line, who financed it for 3 films rather than the Miramax. But yeah, famously, he's Pete's come out and said that Harvey Weinstein told him not to hire Amber Heard, I believe. Was it Amber Heard?
I can't remember.
But basically said, don't hire her because she won't have sex with me. And Pete was like, cool, let's ruin her career together. Although he actually wasn't complicit in that. He didn't know why, but he said, don't work with her. She's a nightmare. Which is a shame that the career's going to be ruined like that.
So it's crazy that this was almost 1 film. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I remember hearing, like, apparently, like, Legolas and Arwen would have been combined into 1 character. And shit like that. And it's just insane to think that at any point during a 11-hour trilogy, someone was like, oh, maybe, maybe it could be 1 film. I don't know.
Yeah.
But that being said, this is actually the second Lord of the Rings trilogy. Because Ralph Bakshi... Well, Ralph Bakshi made Lord of the Rings, which tells the story of Fellowship of the Ring and the Two Towers. But there's also an animated The Hobbit and an animated Return of the King that are all like kind of... I think they're considered sequels. They might not be.
Yeah.
But the whole story is
We're not talking about them.
In animation. Yeah.
But yeah, so let's talk about titles now.
Oh.
Because... interestingly, all 3 at the bottom, not the whole thing, but the subtitles all have title bombs. So, AJ, can you rank those title bombs for me? Because I know you love a good title bomb.
I do love a good title bomb. Right at the bottom is Fellowship of the Ring, because it's kind of a title bomb in the way that Jurassic Park is a title bomb. Like, it's a namesake used in the film and not just a random phrase that a character says.
Right, but it's only said once in the film.
Is it really? Oh, but they refer to it. It's still a thing. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's
right. Yeah.
It's referring.
to... there is a definitive time when they're like the Fellowship of the Ring.
Yeah,
and I think they've referred to as the Fellowship.
Yeah.
After that, yeah.
But it's still like, I like my title bombs to be like, if one of these characters...
How dare you deny the Return of the King?
Yeah, if one of these characters found out they were in a movie and they were like, and the movie's called this, they'd be like, oh yeah, because one of us said that at some point. Those are my favorite kinds of title bombs.
Yeah.
So between Two Towers and Return of the King, I think Return of the King is the best one because it's
definitely.
It's set on screen and it's got so much clout to it, and it's Gandalf delivering it to like this little bitch of a steward who's like, who are you to deny the return of the king? And it's very cool. So yeah. That being said,
oh, here we go.
I'm not sure I'm that keen on the titles as a whole.
Okay, do you want to rename all of them?
I don't have ideas for renaming them, but it does bug me. Like, I've talked before, I think, about how...
How dare you deny the Return of the King as the title?
Yeah. I think I've talked before how Something of the Something feels so lazy to me as a titling scheme. So Lord of the Rings is fine as your moniker, but... It real annoyed me when they renamed the Hobbit sequels because it was going to be an unexpected journey and there and back again.
Yeah.
And then there was the Desolation of Smaug and the Battle of the Five Armies, and I was like, ugh. Yeah. And I remember some people saying that Desolation of Smaug should have been called Into the Fire, which I really like as a title because that's the name of a chapter in the book, I think. And so I don't have alternate ideas, but I do know a little piece of trivia, Richard.
AJ... You know I love trivia. So I've got to have it.
Did you know that Tolkien wanted to call Return of the King the War of the Ring? Mm-hmm. And his publisher was like, nah, don't call it that. And he was like, Return of the King spoils the ending. And they were like, no, don't call it War of the Ring. And as much as I agree it does spoil the ending, Return of the King's a better name than War of the Ring. I'd be even more infuriated if it was Fellowship of the Ring, War of the Ring, and then the Two Towers just slapped in the middle like a gross breakfast you've woken up to, Like someone's
in the middle of your day.
Yeah, someone's bought you breakfast in bed and it's like just a rotten tomato.
It's all bran. No, I actually love all bran. I've been having all bran recently. Man, it's good. I always thought I hated it, but
I've never had it. I just assumed anything with bran in it I wouldn't like.
bran muffins. My friend Ben makes the best bran muffins.
Interesting.
Every time I go down to Christchurch, I'm like, dude, you need to make me this bran muffins.
And does he?
Sometimes, yeah.
Are the bran muffins your like one ring? Like you're like,
yeah.
precious.
Well, because he has like, because they're like small, but they have like a cube of cream cheese in the middle.
Ah, that's it. That's the equivalent of the Elvish writing on the one ring.
Well, AJ, can we talk about memes?
Oh, fucking hell, yes, man, of course. I've been waiting an hour and 14 minutes to talk about memes.
Not even just Lord of the Rings, just memes in general.
Yeah.
Have you seen the new Dat Boy?
It's such a better model so much more of a better model than the last one.
So, Lord of the Rings is one of those movies that's been memed quite a bit. Mm-hmm. What do you think of the memery around this movie? And do you have a favorite Lord of the Rings meme?
It's iconic, man. Like, and you've got memes from completely different generations of memehood, right? So you've got like way back when it was one does not simply walk into Mordor. That was changed to like one does not simply da 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 da. And then like 2 months ago we had all right then keep your secrets, and it's like those are from the same movie and they came out 10 years apart from each other.
They came out as memes.
They announced themselves to the world as memes.
Yeah. I love all right, keep your secrets. I think that's so funny.
My favorite is Gandalf looking around confused in the mines of Moria and being like, I have no memory of this place. Because the first version I saw of that was like when you go to make an account on a website and it says you've already got one. It's like, I have no memory of this place. So that was my favorite one.
I also didn't, I'm going to sound dumb for this, but I didn't realize that You Have No Power Here was from Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
I always assumed it was Game of Thrones.
No, interesting.
The other thing I don't care about.
We'd be remiss to not mention they're taking the hobbits to Isengard as well.
Yeah.
Which was a big techno remix back when those things were popular. And so that's another meme. I have nothing to say about these. They just exist.
Yeah.
They're there.
We're just listing the memes. It's not like a meme, but it's like, I mean, I guess if you look like the original definition of the word of like, something that's repeated or whatever. But the whole, why didn't they just take the eagles to Mordor? That's so fucking stupid. Like,
do you want to clarify what you mean in case someone hasn't seen?
Okay, so at the end of Return of the King, Frodo and Sam have sort of left themselves to die and accepted their fate, and then they get picked up by these giant eagles who take their safety. It's a bit of a Deus Ex Machina.
Yeah, Gandalf is like commanding the eagles, so it's like, why didn't Gandalf do that originally?
Yeah, but like, it's a meme of how hard it is to walk into Mordor. Do you think it's going to be any fucking easier on the back of these gigantic eagles?
Yeah.
If people are like, oh, if you walk in, you're going to get found or you're going to get killed. These, like, you can't fly in on these eagles.
Yeah. Are you aware of the fan theory?
Well, I know there's like a couple of things, like the eagles are, they always try and stay neutral so they wouldn't take a side in the battle, and there's stuff like that, but I don't know specifically what you're referring to.
So this is one of the best fan theories I've ever read, and I looked it up again on Reddit last night, and the top comment is like, this is one of the best fan theories I've ever read. Like,
and it was you.
No, it wasn't. But
and it was like, that's my username, but I have no memory of this place.
No, so the theory is that Gandalf was like, after because he escaped Saruman's tower back when he went to and he discovered he was evil, when a moth flew past him and it kind of implied that the eagles like rescued him from or does it actually show it? I can't remember. But the theory is that Gandalf, when he got out of Isengard the first time, actually had like counsel with the eagles and was like, okay, you guys need to carry the ring bearer to Mordor. Okay, so his plan was actually to use the eagles. And so that's his plan all along, but he doesn't tell anyone because if he tells, like, Sauron has many spies, so it's like anyone could know about this, and it still is dangerous because there's Nazgul and stuff, so like anyone could knock down an eagle if they knew they were coming. And so he gets to Riverdale. Is that what it's What's it called?
Rivendell.
So good. He gets to Riverdale, Archie's there, and he's
and
like,
he meets Josie and the Pussycats.
so then all of a sudden there's a fellowship of the ring and it's 9 men, and he's like, okay, that's more than what I was anticipating, but there's plenty of eagles. We can probably carry us all. And so they keep going, and if you look at the map of like the official map of Middle Earth, there is a reason why Gandalf wanted to go the High Pass and not through the Mines of Moria, like in terms of keeping safe from any like watchful eyes. But they had to go through Moria, and they go through Moria, and while they're in Moria, the Balrog's there, and he kills Gandalf. He whips him and he falls off the cliff. But before he falls, Gandalf's like, I've got to tell them about the eagles, but there's so many orcs around here that they'll hear me. So as he's about to fall, he looks at them and goes, fly, you fools, and then falls to his death.
They're like, I better keep walking.
Yeah, and then they don't realize he means the eagles, because that's where, like, if you look at the map of where they were going, they could have either been going to Mordor or like where the eagles live. The Misty Mountains, I think, is where the eagles live. And so the rest of the Fellowship, who didn't know that was Gandalf's plan, keep on their merry way, and by the time Gandalf turns up again, he doesn't even remember his own name until he's reminded. You know, so like, because they're like, Gandalf, he's like, yes, that's what they used to call me. So he just forgot that his plan, and even if he didn't forget, it was too late to really use them. I love that theory. I think that's an excellent way to work around.
Yeah, I have seen that. I remember seeing like a fan theory that was like an interpretation of Fly, You Fools. But yeah. No, it's good. I think, that's canon now.
It is now.
We did it.
We did it, Reddit.
All right, so we put out a call to you, the fans, on Facebook and Instagram this week, asking for your favourite moments in the Lord of the Rings franchise.
Yeah.
So, AJ, do we want to talk about ours while you pull up? We're going to read out some of yours.
I really like just the last 15 minutes. No, actually not the last 15 minutes of Return of the King. I like everything from like Frodo and Sam getting to Mount Doom and then destroying the ring. I think that's like the high point of the series.
Yeah.
I really like the prequel, the opening scene with Smeagol as a human, despite its foibles that we were discussing.
Yeah. It's funny, you're talking about getting to Mount Doom. Watching this films again, so I haven't seen Return of the King in 16 years, or probably 15, 16 years. And I still remember the shot where in the cinema, I turned to Mum and I was like, I need to pee. And she was like, oh, no, like, don't, just hold it. Like, it's almost over. Look. And Return of the King famously takes a long time to end.
Yeah.
Like, that's what people talk about with the movie, is that it, there's like 6 different endings, 6 different times when it fades to black and you're like, oh, it's over. And it's the shot, if you're watching the film or if you know the films really well, it's when the sort of gate or the opening to Mount Doom is first revealed, and there's this wide shot where Smeagol's revealed, or Gollum's revealed.
Right.
And it was that shot. And it's like 45 minutes before the end of the film. And that was like, I fucking real needed to pee for so long.
Peed your pants.
But I should have. That would have showed it. But I watched an interview with Peter Jackson. I just happened to watch it the other day. He said his favourite moment in the franchise, or his favourite like shot, is when what's the spider's name? Shelob is there's like, after he sort of escaped Shelob, and then when it like Shelob like reappears and climbs over, like following Frodo. That's Peter Jackson's favourite shot in the franchise.
It would be,
Yeah,
because
he's terrified
movie.
of spiders, and and that shot is just so like creepy.
Do you know? I think I remember hearing that the Shelob scene is in Two Towers, the book. So they had to move it into Return of the King to give Frodo and Sam a decent storyline.
Yeah. I did see that actually. But my favourite bit in the franchise, and like I said before, like I don't like these films, but I can accept the argument that they're the best, that they are the greatest films of all time. I think there's an argument to be made that My Friends, You Bow to No One is the greatest scene in cinematic history.
Yeah, it's so good.
It's so good. I was like tearing up last night, and I was like, I haven't cared about the last 10 hours of this. But oh my god,
that and the when Sam's like, "Don't you dare let go," and he's like, "Reach!" It's like, oh, this is such powerful acting, filmmaking, shot composition, like story stakes. It's so good because when you watch that for the first time, you're like, Frodo's going to just drop. And Sam's like, fucking do you fucking do it. Like, I've been carrying you for 3 films. You are not just gonna die here. So I love that scene. All right,
my friends, you better know what it is. Oh, beautiful. I might just go watch that again after this because it's so good. It's so good.
So speaking of that, is Evan, who commented on our post about it. We asked what people's favourite scenes were. He says, yep, my friends, you bow to no one. Alan says, toss me, just don't tell the elf, which is a great one.
That's a good one, yeah.
That's a good Gimli moment. Ariel says, give it to us raw and wriggling, which I think an orc says.
Yeah.
And that's what Gollum says. The orc one is like, looks like meat's back on the menu, boys.
I didn't realise that was from this as well. I've said that in my life, and I didn't realise it was from this. Yeah, that was funny.
Jesse says, literally any scene with Aragorn. Dan says, they're taking the hobbits to Isengard, to which Emma replied, to Isengard, to Isengard.
I don't think I've seen this.
It's great. So we're like, Balrog of Moria, what did you say? That's like the one part I always remember. The hobbits to Isengard. Ed says, this is Ed from Baboon Yodel, which is a cool podcast. He says, when Tom Cruise goes to that place and there is an orgy of elves wearing masks. I don't know what he means.
That's from Stanley Kubrick's last Eyes Wide Shut.
Okay. Scott says, it's weird, your question seems to imply you're only wanting one scene, but that can't be right because there's no such thing as just one favourite scene in Lord of the Rings. Science. And then he okay, this one's, alright, he's got a list. He says, God damn it, now you've got me thinking about way too much. So his favourite scenes are Bilbo and Gandalf at Bag End, the Council of Elrond, Balin's tomb, the death of Boromir, the conversation between Gollum and Smeagol and Two Towers, the exorcism of Theoden, Faramir's suicide attack on Osgiliath, the lighting of the beacons, the ride to Rohirrim, of the Rohirrim, and at the Samath Naur. Some of those things I don't know.
This is one of those things that like with that just sounds so ridiculous to me. Like all those fantasy words, I'm like, it's just silly.
Nathan says, obviously the bit in the Battle of Helm's Deep where Legolas rides a shield like a skateboard down some stairs while shooting orcs, then kickflips the shield into an orc's chest. Fuck, that's badass. It's so good.
And then they're like, oh, let's give him a moment like that in The Hobbit. It's just the stupidest fucking thing.
Scott says, honestly, the scene just after they meet up with Merry and Pippin and have to ride under the bridge away from the ring wraith, top-notch suspense. Agreed. Eric says, most likely when Aragorn and King Theoden reside to their fate at Helm's Deep and ride out to their death only to have Gandalf and their countrymen come to their aid at the most opportune time. It is a beautiful scene with very epic music. He said, most quoted moments in my family include, and they call it a mine. A mine! Cast it into the fire, destroy it, Isildur, and rally to me! To me! This trilogy holds a special place in our hearts for sure. And he also wrote, what say you? My dad commented, he wrote, I can't carry the ring, Mr. Frodo, but I can carry you. Alan says he was twitching because he's got my axe embedded in his nervous system. Let's skip through some of these. So Miguel says the end credits, it's the only scene that's 15 minutes long. Sean says the Mines of Moria. Mark says, does the trilogy count as one scene? And Ben, who's one of our patrons, said the scene where the main antagonist dives into that pool and then comes out completely blue, and then he goes and has a shower somehow without seeing himself in the mirror, and his shampoo dyes his hair all orange, which is of course actually a scene from Big Fat Liar, which if you were a part of our patreon.com/cultpopture, you would know that there's actually a dumb sequel that someone made a year ago to Big Fat Liar called Bigger Fatter Liar, and there's a movement to get us to cover Big Fat Liar, the franchise, which I don't want to do. On Instagram, Art4Life42 says every single one. Connor_Watt_Son says Gimli, I'm not going to make the jump. You're going to have to toss me, which speaks to my heart, man. The amount of times I've had to climb a fence or something and been like, you're going to have to toss me. For those who don't know what I look like, I'm a short bearded man. Like I am Gimli.
And I look more like Aragorn.
Chasing Hope Mama says, boil it, mash it, stick it in a stew. NZ Ribidu says, that still only counts as one, which a lot of these are just quotes. And Fudan Hito says, the scene with Tom Bombadil. Oh, wait. Do you know what he's referring to there, Richard?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah? Do you want to talk about it?
Well, there's a character called Tom Bombadil who apparently everyone likes, and he's in the book but not in the movie.
Yeah, I think he's in Fellowship of the Ring, and he's supposed to be. I'm recalling. Please correct me. I think he's supposed to be like a metaphor for God, and he's like hanging out in the woods, and apparently he's real dumb and annoying.
Yeah, he sounds like his dumb name.
I'll look up Tom Bombadil quote.
Give
us Tom Bombadil, Peter Jackson.
Actually, now that we've listed them, and I did say that there's an argument to be made that My Frenzy About to No One is the greatest scene in cinema history, but my personal favourite moment in the franchise is Pippin singing Edge of Night as they go into battle. Fuck, that's a good scene.
Yeah, man.
It's such a good song. He's got such a good voice, and I love when the like trope of war or like, you know, some kind of big action with the sound more or less removed and having like just some nice peaceful music over top of it.
The juxtaposition.
Yeah. Love it.
All right, here's a Tom Bombadil quote. Ho, Tom Bombadil, Tom Bombadillo, by water, wood and hill, by reed and willow, by fire, sun and moon, hearken now and hear us. Come, Tom Bombadil, for our need is near us. So that's pretty fun.
Yeah.
Give us the Tom Bombadil. Release the Tom Bombadil cut.
Well, I think it's about time to continue that franchise.
Oh, yeah.
So there's a couple of continuations that have already happened in various stages of happening. So there's obviously the Hobbit prequel trilogy, which, don't you worry, we'll be covering next week. So you're getting... No, 2 weeks from now. Sorry. There is a TV series coming to Amazon TV.
Though it's not confirmed if that's in the continuity of the films, is it?
No, well, it's like another adaptation of the
Yeah.
books. But yeah, anyway, like, you know, if you're interested in Lord of the Rings.
Right.
So it's going to cost $1 billion, touted as the most expensive TV series in history. Apparently, New Zealand is in consideration to film in, but as of 23rd of December 2018, that's in jeopardy.
Of course it is.
That same interview I watched with Peter Jackson, they asked if he was like involved in it in any way, or if he was going to get involved, and he basically laughed and said, fuck no. But he was like, no, I wish them well. He wants no part of it. He said, like, I'll read through some scripts if they want me to or whatever. But so that's apparently not supposed to start production until like 2021 at the earliest, so it probably might not be out till like 2023. But I thought, have you got any casting ideas?
No, I don't. I've got opinions about it. I think
I'm not going to watch it.
I don't think the world needs another just straight adaptation of the story.
Right.
I would rather explore
the Silmarillion.
Yeah. Well, I know that I remember hearing, maybe it was one of those documentaries or something, where they were talking about how Tolkien actually wanted people to take Middle-earth and write their own stories within it. And so I think this could be a realization of that. I think I'd rather it was set in the film universe and just in a different story.
Interesting. Have you read the books, by the way?
No.
Neither. But if you ask my year 8 teacher, I have.
Okay.
Because we had to keep a reading diary of all the books you read, and you're expected to read like 5 or 6 in a term. And I didn't read any. And then I was like, oh, fuck, what do I do? So I wrote down that I read the Lord of the Rings trilogy because I was like, it's real long. So it's like, fine that I've only read 3. And she signed it off and was like, yeah, sweet. And my parents saw and Mum might be listening to this and remember and be like, ah, ha, ha. But they saw my signed off reading log that said Lord of the Rings trilogy and a tick. And they thought it was so fucking funny. And I was like, they weren't even mad about lying.
Richard can't read.
There's also a film called The Lord of the G-Strings, The Female Ship of the String, which was a softcore porn parody. The plot of that is a diminutive and seductive throbbit has been entrusted with the task of destroying the all-powerful G-string that can grant its possessor untold powers.
Okay. What happened to Lord of the Cock Ring? That's one, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. This one's a softcore porn parody, though.
Okay.
It's not very good.
Okay. Did you watch it?
Moving on.
There's a lot to cover here, and what other media has been made.
Well, I mean, I've got one more, but okay. Ooh. So this is like an opposite of a continue the franchise, but another attempted adaptation of it was back in the 60s, I guess. The Beatles asked Stanley Kubrick to adapt the book. Kubrick declined. He said the books were unfilmable, but if they'd gone ahead, they would have starred Paul McCartney as Frodo, George Harrison as Gandalf, Ringo Starr as Samwise Gamgee, and John Lennon as Gollum.
God.
And directed by Stanley Kubrick. Man, that would be a fucking weird film.
Yeah, it would be.
Now, do you have a continue the franchise ready to go?
Do you want me to rattle off a few other continuations that have already happened?
Oh, I feel like, yeah.
Because I think there's loads of video games, and I think Shadow of Mordor, which came out recently, is like set in the universe and is a new story. And then, of course, there's the Silmarillion, which is essentially an encyclopedia. But I've always been fascinated.
It's like a selection of poems and shit.
Yeah. There is actually another Lord of the Rings book that I think he wrote the original. So Tolkien wrote the original version, and then his son, after he died, edited the manuscripts into a consistent narrative. And that book is called The Children of Hurin. And no one ever talks about that. And I think that's kind of interesting.
Interesting.
Yes, I have a continue the franchise.
Okay.
All right. So you've got an original trilogy. Then you've got a prequel trilogy. Right?
Yeah.
Much like Star Wars. But what did Star Wars do? They had a sequel trilogy.
Okay, can I stop you there?
Yeah.
This was going to be my one as well, but I was going to just I wanted to have like some back and forth pitching it. Oh. So I'm just going to jump on yours.
Okay.
And this is it, okay?
Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
So the idea that I landed on was... So they talk a lot in Lord of the Rings about how the age of elves is over, like the time like elves were the dominant race for a long time, and now it's the age of man, right? It's the trend. Yeah. The whole story takes over from the transition of the age of elves to the age of men.
Yeah. So we're going to cover the age of Ultron.
Well, first of all, was the age of dwarves a thing? Because they're the other big faction, and so I'd be interested to see what an age of dwarves looks like, and everyone's just real rough and tumble. But also, is there a reason that hobbits aren't considered a fourth faction? Or are they like a subgenre of human, maybe? Anyway, I want to see the age of hobbits and see what the world looks like when hobbits rule it.
Nice. Yeah, because I was thinking about this, like, you made a video about this, but, like, using the Star Wars Looney Tunes Fargo model of, like, how would you make a sequel trilogy to Lord of the Rings? Because if you don't know what I'm talking about, is, like, the Tiny Toons adventure, like, it split Bugs Bunny into two characters.
Yeah.
Took a different part of them each. And so having those, like, updated versions of each character and splitting certain ones into two, I was like, yeah, well, how would you do that with Lord of the Rings?
Well, I think you'd split Frodo in two and have one be, like, a real good guy and one be a real bad guy. Not literally the character of Frodo, but two characters who accumulatively make up Frodo. Yeah,
play the part of Frodo. And one of them's a woman, obviously.
Which is great because there aren't enough women in Lord of the Rings, frankly. There's Galadriel, Arwen, Eowyn, and Shelob. Those are the women in Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. Okay, so that's how you can do the franchise.
Well, that and the Tom Bombadil cut.
Yeah.
Release it.
Nice.
Peter Jackson, you son of a bitch. I know you have it. I looked through your window because you're my neighbour and saw you watching the Tom Bombadil cut. And
who played Tom Bombadil?
Jim Carrey, dude. It was the early 2000s.
Wow. To think we missed out. I mean, I guess that's all we've got time for it.
Yeah. You might be a bit disappointed that I feel like comparatively, I felt like we could still talk if we're real into them, we could talk about them for like another hour. And I know that you might consider this a bit trivia light. But one of the big things that people they asked us, like, are you doing the extended editions? And the answer was yes. And then a couple of people also were like, are you going to watch the special features? Which is such a strange question to be asked in 2019 because the age of DVD is over. Like the age of streaming has begun.
And the age of eating ass.
Why? Why isn't that? What is
Well,
that?
that's just if the internet's anything to go by.
Right. Well, anyway,
That's what millennials are doing.
I haven't watched a DVD. I haven't watched a special feature in 15 years. Like, I've bought DVD collector's editions of things and still haven't watched the special features on them.
Yeah.
So no, we didn't watch the special features. But if you are a patron, and everyone who's not a
would
patron,
like to become one,
everyone who's not a patron but loves Lord of the Rings is going to be like, fuck right now. We are going to be covering there's documentaries about each film, right?
Yeah, or like there's like a feature length version, like amount of behind the scenes documentary-esque stuff. There's a lot of filming done behind the scenes, and you see the clips of them on YouTube every now and then. But for each film.
Yeah. So we're going to be covering them this month on Film Franchise Follow-Ups, which is our Patreon exclusive podcast that you can get if you become a cult member, which is $5 a month. So, you know.
Yeah, $5 a month, you get an extra podcast, and you get to vote on every second film
And you also
franchise.
get our newsletter that we've started as well. And you know what? You can pay for 1 month, listen to us talk about the documentaries.
And listen to the old episodes as well.
And then fucking leave. You can stop being a patron after that. We're not going to stop you. Nothing's going to stop you. So there you go.
So you can find that at www.patreon.com/cultpopshow. And if you did like this and if you want to tell us how wrong we are about Lord of the Rings, please do. I would love to hear.
I liked them. So if someone's going to message me and be like, AJ, Lord of the Rings sucks. What are you talking about? You're a madman.
Yeah. I think you were more negative about Lord of the Rings than I was.
How so?
I don't know. I just remember you said one negative thing, and I was like, that's the
very,
only thing I said is I didn't like.
That's very grown up of you, AJ.
Yeah, I'm very proud of you, and I think tell us if we're wrong. Tell us if we mispronounced anything.
It does feel like we haven't talked about Lord of the Rings enough.
Yeah, it is weird because we talked about like Mission Impossible for like 2 hours, like an extra hour on this.
There's more Mission Impossible films though.
Yeah, this is true. But there's only just barely more runtime.
Yeah, for sure. Look, as we said,
it feels weird to be apologizing so profusely.
I'm not apologizing. It's just it's not over. There's a Hobbit episode coming out in 2 weeks where we'll keep talking about Middle Earth, and then we're doing film franchise follow-ups. That's a trilogy. And maybe it will be like, guess what? There's one more. We split the Hobbit.
We're going to do the prequel trilogy and read the books.
We split the Hobbit episode into 2 episodes.
And
it's not long enough, so we just repeat stuff. And like, what a good joke. All right. Cool, yeah. So, yeah. Did you do our call to action? I can't remember. I think you started it. Facebook.
Check us out.
YouTube,
SoundCloud.
Instagram, iTunes. Go find us and love on us, please. We need you.
Actually, I mean, you could have finished your thought, sorry.
I didn't.
We need you. That was it. This is actually a good episode to start your new thing you wanted to start this year.
Oh, yeah. What was it called? Hashtag Ask Everyone 2019.
Yeah.
So we recently did an episode that where we looked at we interviewed Chris Weitz, who's one of the directors of American Pie, and he also directed a couple of other movies that we've covered on this podcast and wrote a few of them as well. And that was really popular. So one thing that I want to do this year in wake of that is every week I am going to tweet someone from who's like been involved in some way with some franchise we've covered and ask them for an interview, right? And the reason I'm announcing this is because when you do business like that on Twitter, it's public and it feels a little bit silly. So by making it, you guys are involved too, so if you see me tweet, I don't know, Peter Jackson and ask him for an
Jackson
interview.
doesn't have Twitter.
Oh, shit. All right.
Ian McKellen.
I'll tweet someone. I won't do it this episode, but I'll tweet someone from the franchise we're covering on air on the episode. I think is what I was planning on doing.
Yeah. Okay.
And so I won't do it this episode.
Ask your old mate Brett.
I should. What's it like being Figwit? We interviewed Flight of the Conchords' Brett McKenzie for an hour and a half and only talk about Figwit.
There's a documentary about Figwit
Amazing.
that Brett and his wife made.
Imagine getting famous 2 separate ways.
Yeah.
Because that's what happened with him. He got famous twice.
Yeah. And he's one of the Oscar winners in the cast as well.
Oh, true. Yeah, there you go. There you
Look,
bloody go.
we've wrapped up the episode and we're still just chucking out hot these words.
Precious. Oh, fuck. I always go to franchise appropriate puns, but they're never good. They're never good ones. I just say a word and it's like yep,
one pun to rule them all.
the one. I need that. I need the
pun
one
ring.
Pun.
It's like an underground ring of people that trade puns.
Because in 2079, like puns are illegal and you got to trade them.
That feels like a writing prompt thing.
Yeah. All right.
Well, just like the Return of the King, here's another ending to this podcast.
Imagine if I just read out our fan mail now. And it's like that's the extra ending. I haven't accumulated.
That's the fan credits that are an extra 20 minutes on the extended editions.
We should release an extended edition of this podcast.
We should.
Right, please tell us.
But we release it 2 months after it's it's released because we shot some extra stuff for it.
Please let us know what you thought of this episode, and let us know if you thought it was good, if it was a worthy addition to both our podcast and the library of podcasts that talk about Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, I hope so.
Me too. All right,
and I hope that you had a good time.
Into the wind.
Da-da-da, da-da-da, da-da-da. Dun, 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 dun.
All right, I'm gonna just stop recording.